Evelyn Pierce had always thought she knew the path her life would take. At 67, after over 4 decades of nursing and caregiving, she felt secure in the life she'd built with her late husband, Daniel. Their home, nestled on the cliffs of coastal New Zealand, had been her sanctuary, a place where she and Daniel had shared both the triumphs and trials of life. But that security was ripped away the moment Daniel passed. It happened too quickly. One moment, they were discussing future vacations, and the next, Daniel was gone, his heart failing without warning in the middle of the night. Evelyn hadn't even had time to properly mourn before the world around her crumbled. 3 days after burying the man she'd spent her life with, Evelyn stood at the threshold of their home, still wearing the same black dress she'd worn to his funeral. Her mind was a blur. Her hands trembled as she held the legal papers in front of her, her eyes struggling to focus on the words that would change everything. The lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her early 40s, spoke with clinical detachment. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Pierce, but as per the terms of your husband's will, the house was purchased before your marriage and was kept in his name alone. It's now legally under the ownership of his daughter, Aurora Blake. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She'd known Aurora, her stepdaughter, for almost 20 years, but their relationship had always been strained. Aurora had never liked her. Still, Evelyn had never imagined her husband's daughter would be the one to turn her life upside down. The lawyer's voice faded into the background as Evelyn's heart pounded. Aurora entered the room, her cold gaze cutting through the air like a blade. The designer heels clicking on the hardwood floors seemed to echo louder with each step she took. "Sorry, Evelyn," she said, her voice icy and controlled, "but it's time for you to go. Dad always knew you were just an opportunist, a lonely widow who took advantage of his kindness." Evelyn's stomach twisted. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could Aurora say such things after everything they'd been through? How could she be so cruel? "You have 30 days, Evelyn. You're not family," Aurora repeated, her lips curling into a faint, smug smile. "Good luck finding somewhere to stay. I'm sure you'll manage." The lawyer handed Evelyn the papers. Her fingers gripped the pages tightly, her knuckles white with anger and disbelief. She had no choice. There was no fighting this. Daniel was gone, and with him any hope of a secure future. As the door shut behind them, Evelyn stood motionless, the weight of the words pressing down on her chest. The silence in the house felt suffocating, heavy with the memories of the life she had shared with Daniel, the laughter, the plans for the future, the simple mornings spent together in the garden. But those memories didn't belong to her anymore. They belonged to Aurora, who now controlled everything Evelyn had loved. Alone, Evelyn wandered through the rooms, touching the surfaces, each object a reminder of what she'd lost. The china they'd received as wedding gifts, the framed photos from their travels, even the rose bush in the garden that Daniel had planted for her, it all seemed so fleeting now. The life she had worked for, the years of devotion to Daniel, had evaporated with a few cruel words. That night, Evelyn called her sister, Marie, in Phoenix, hoping for some kind of comfort, some sort of lifeline. She couldn't even afford the call. It had taken her everything to scrape together a few dollars just to make it through the day. "Marie, I need help," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. Marie's voice was soft but filled with regret. "Honey, I wish I could help, but Bob's medical bills have wiped us out. We can barely keep our heads above water ourselves." Evelyn sat there in the darkened living room, staring at the phone in her hand. She felt the weight of her situation sink in. She had no family to turn to, no friends with resources. She had nothing left but a few $1,000s in her bank account, and that wouldn't last long. She couldn't even afford a place to live. At 67, she had no career, no prospects, and now no home. With a sigh, she looked at the dusty coffee table beside her, Daniel's favorite place to sit. The room, once warm and familiar, now felt like a tomb. In that moment, something inside Evelyn shifted. She would not let Aurora's cruelty define her. She wouldn't let this be the end of her story. Tomorrow, she would find a way to rebuild. She would stand up and fight. There had to be a way. And that's when she found the job listing caregiver wanted. Female, age 60 plus. Private duty for a wheelchair-bound professional. Excellent salary. Room and board included. Serious inquiries only. It seemed like the last shred of hope in a world that had turned its back on her. Desperation led her to make the call. Little did she know, the man on the other side of the phone would change everything. The next day, Evelyn stood at the door of a modest downtown coffee shop, her fingers nervously gripping the crumpled job listing in her hand. She felt both a sense of desperation and a flicker of hope. Experienced caregiver wanted. The words felt like a lifeline, her only chance to reclaim some dignity, to find a way out of the suffocating reality that had consumed her life. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open and stepped inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. She ordered a simple black coffee and sat at a corner table, scanning the job listings once more. Nothing else seemed like a viable option. Grocery store greeter, babysitting. Her age made her a liability in most people's eyes. The coffee shop bustled with people, but Evelyn felt like she was in her own world, her mind racing with what could be next. Her phone vibrated, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was the answer she had been waiting for. Cross residence. Mr. Blackwood's assistant, Sarah, we've reviewed your application. Can you come for an interview at 2:00 p.m. tomorrow in Malibu? Malibu. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of Asher Blackwood, a reclusive billionaire tech mogul known for his advancements in artificial intelligence and cybersecurity. He was paralyzed from a mysterious accident that had left him wheelchair-bound for the last few years. Asher was a man of power and influence, yet he was also a mystery. She wasn't sure what to expect, but it felt like she was being drawn into something much bigger than her. The moment she agreed, the assistant informed her of a few things. She had to bring her nursing credentials, 3 professional references, and dress appropriately. At 2:00 p.m. the next day, Evelyn's heart pounded as she made the long, winding drive through the hills of Malibu. The road seemed endless, and with each passing mile, she felt the weight of her life's choices. But there was no turning back now. The Blackwood estate appeared like a fortress in the distance. Its modern glass and steel design was stark and imposing. Nestled on the edge of a cliff overlooking the vast, open ocean, the grand driveway stretched longer than she expected, flanked by rows of palm trees that looked more like sculptures than actual plants. As she drove closer, the mansion came into full view, sleek, imposing, and untouched by the world. Evelyn parked her old car, feeling self-conscious about its age and wear compared to the luxurious surroundings. She adjusted her blouse, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. Sarah, Asher's assistant, greeted her with a smile that seemed too perfect, like a trained actor's performance. Evelyn followed Sarah through the grand entrance, her heels clicking on the marble floors, which felt as cold as the atmosphere. "Mr. Blackwood is expecting you," Sarah said, her voice as polished as the mansion's floors. "But there are a few things you should know about him. He values privacy and discretion above all else." They passed several corridors before stopping at a massive office door, opening it slowly. Inside, the room was immaculate, filled with the kind of technology Evelyn had only heard about in the news, futuristic monitors, advanced tech gadgets she couldn't even name. The entire space had a sterile feeling, like an operating room, but the view of the ocean through the glass walls provided an odd sense of calm. At the desk sat Asher Blackwood, his wheelchair blending into the space as though it belonged there. His dark hair was tinged with silver, and his eyes, intense, piercing, studied Evelyn as she walked in. "Mrs. Pierce," he said, his voice deep but warm. "Please sit down." Evelyn felt a lump in her throat, but she managed to keep her composure. As she sat across from him, she couldn't help but notice the subtle power he exuded, despite his condition. He wasn't just a billionaire mogul. He was someone who had built an empire and had lost it all due to an accident, now dependent on others for help. She introduced herself, explaining her background as a nurse and her experience with caregiving. Asher listened intently but didn't offer much in terms of small talk. His eyes never left her face, like he was assessing her not just for the job, but for something else, something personal. "So why do you want this job?" Asher asked bluntly. There was no politeness, no pretense in his voice. "I need it," Evelyn said simply. "My husband passed away recently, and I've discovered I'm not as financially secure as I thought. I'm starting over." Asher didn't look surprised. He nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair, eyes still locked on hers. "I've had several caregivers in the past year," he said. "Some left because they couldn't handle my condition, others because they saw me as an investment. I need someone who sees me as a person, not a project." Evelyn felt a strange sense of connection. She wasn't just a nurse to him. She was someone who needed to be trusted. But Evelyn couldn't help but wonder why he was so adamant about mature caregivers. The line of questioning, the lack of small talk, it all seemed strangely intimate for an employer-employee relationship. Asher continued, "I want someone who is not here for my wealth or my disability, someone who understands honesty, hard work, and privacy." It was then that Evelyn realized that, for the first time in days, she didn't feel like a widow or a burden. For a brief moment, she felt like someone who had value beyond her circumstances. Asher's final words still echoed in her head. "I pay well for loyalty and competence. Room and board are included, and you'll have your own suite in the house. How soon can you start?" The offer was more than generous, it was life-changing. With that, Evelyn nodded. "I'll start immediately." As she left the office, her mind buzzed with everything that had just transpired. She had a new job, a new purpose. And while she didn't yet know the full extent of Asher Blackwood's life, or what her role in it would ultimately be, Evelyn had a feeling this was only the beginning of something much bigger than she had ever expected. As she made her way back down the hall, she caught sight of Sarah, who offered a smile that felt strangely knowing, almost as if she'd been watching this entire conversation unfold from the shadows. But Evelyn didn't care. For the first time in a long while, she had a chance. And she wasn't about to waste it. Evelyn stepped into her new life as she crossed the threshold of Asher Blackwood's estate. The sprawling mansion, tucked away in the cliffs of Malibu, felt like an entirely different world. Her old life, filled with loss and betrayal, seemed a distant memory as she adjusted to the sleek, high-tech atmosphere of the house. The guest suite Asher had assigned her was beyond anything Evelyn had ever imagined. It was large, modern, and meticulously decorated, with large windows overlooking the ocean. The room was furnished with everything she could need: comfort, privacy, and the solitude she craved. She was amazed by the space, the view, and the serenity the room offered. She unpacked her meager belongings, feeling both humbled and overwhelmed. This wasn't her life, not yet, but maybe it could be if she could prove herself to Asher. The next few days were a blur of adjustment. Evelyn learned the intricacies of Asher's daily routine, his physical therapy sessions, his meal preferences, the way he liked his office organized. At first, she felt like a stranger in his world, out of place in a mansion filled with technology that felt alien to her. But as the days passed, she grew more comfortable. Asher was strict but not unkind, and he respected her professionalism. One morning, as Evelyn was preparing his breakfast, she heard Asher's voice calling from the other side of the house. "Evelyn, come in here for a moment." She walked into his office where Asher sat behind his massive desk, staring at a screen full of codes and algorithms. "I need to talk to you about something," Asher said, his expression serious. "Have you been settling in okay?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes, everything's fine, thank you." "I'm glad to hear that," he said, "but I have to be blunt. The reason I hired you, the real reason, is because I need someone I can trust. I've had a lot of people work for me, but some of them saw me as an opportunity, not a person. You seem different." Evelyn felt a strange warmth in her chest. She hadn't expected praise, and it made her feel validated in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "You've probably already figured out that I'm not an ordinary employer," Asher continued, his gaze unwavering. "And that's why I want you to be honest with me. I need someone I can depend on to not only care for me physically, but to also understand the weight of the situation around me." Evelyn tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean, Mr. Blackwood?" Asher's eyes darkened, his tone turning colder. "You're not the first caregiver I've had. The others, they had their own agendas. They didn't care about me, just my wealth, my influence, and I won't tolerate that here." Evelyn's heart quickened. She realized there was more to Asher Blackwood than she had first assumed. He wasn't just a tech mogul, he was someone who had been betrayed and scarred by those closest to him. But why did he hire her, a stranger, after everything he had gone through? "I understand," she said softly, trying to ease the tension. "I'm here to help, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not here for anything but to do my job." He studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Good, then let's make sure we keep it that way." The following week, Evelyn began to notice strange things. Aurora, Asher's estranged daughter, had sent her a message demanding to know where she was staying. At first, Evelyn thought little of it, just a concerned daughter, right? But something about the message felt off. The phrasing was too familiar, almost as if Aurora had been keeping tabs on her. Evelyn brushed it off. Perhaps she was just being paranoid. Asher, too, seemed to be on edge whenever Aurora's name came up in conversation. Every time Evelyn mentioned her stepdaughter, Asher's expression tightened, and he would quickly change the subject. But there was an underlying tension in the way he spoke, something Evelyn couldn't put her finger on. One evening, after preparing dinner for Asher, Evelyn was alone in the kitchen when Sarah, Asher's assistant, approached her. Sarah had been polite, but Evelyn always felt like there was something guarded about her. Tonight was no different. "You've been settling in well, I trust?" Sarah asked, her smile polite but distant. "Yes, thank you," Evelyn replied, offering a slight smile in return. "Asher is a good employer." Sarah nodded, but her eyes seemed to linger on Evelyn, studying her carefully. "I'm glad to hear that," Sarah said, her voice smooth. "But I do want to give you a bit of advice. Asher is a private man, and while he values your help, don't get too comfortable here. There are things about this house, about him, that you don't yet know." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She wasn't sure if Sarah was trying to warn her or simply sizing her up, but the warning was clear. Things weren't as simple as they seemed. The next morning, Evelyn awoke early to find Asher in his study as usual. But there was something different today, a strange energy in the air. As she entered the room, Asher looked up from his work, his face taut with anxiety. "I need you to do something for me," he said, his tone sharp. Evelyn felt a pang of concern. "What's going on?" "Something's off, Evelyn," he said, lowering his voice. "There are people who know too much about me, and I don't trust them. Not anymore. I'm asking you to help me look into something. I need you to find out what Aurora is really up to. She's been poking around, asking questions she shouldn't be asking, and I don't think it's just about the house." Evelyn froze. Aurora, the woman who had already taken so much from her, who had evicted her without a second thought. "Why me?" Evelyn asked, her voice steady despite the nerves creeping in. "Why not someone else?" Asher's gaze softened slightly. "Because, Evelyn, you're not here for my money or my power. I need someone loyal, someone who will stand by me through whatever comes next. I need someone to find the truth." Evelyn hesitated for only a moment before she nodded. "I'll do it." As she left the study, the weight of the task ahead pressed down on her. She was already tangled in a web of lies and secrets. And as much as she wanted to stay out of it, it seemed she had no choice but to dive in head first. Aurora's shadow loomed larger by the day, and Evelyn knew she was about to uncover things she wasn't ready for. But whatever lay ahead, one thing was clear. This was no ordinary job. It was a battle for truth, for power, and perhaps for her very survival. Evelyn couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep in her chest. As she moved through the days, following Asher's instructions, the weight of his request felt heavier with each passing hour. She had promised to uncover the truth about Aurora, her manipulative stepdaughter, who seemed to have more hidden agendas than anyone Evelyn had ever met. But what did she really know about her? And how far was Aurora willing to go to regain control of what she had lost? That afternoon, as Evelyn made her way to the mansion's library, she noticed Sarah walking briskly past her. The assistant's face was set in its usual expressionless mask, but there was a hint of urgency in her step. Evelyn had learned quickly that Sarah wasn't someone to be underestimated. She was more than just a helper around the estate. She was someone with a hidden agenda of her own. Evelyn had sensed it, though Sarah had always kept her distance. Before Evelyn could greet her, Sarah turned a corner and disappeared into one of the house's many corridors. Evelyn stood there for a moment, contemplating the uneasy feeling that had begun to grow inside her. Was she just imagining things, or was there more to Sarah than she was letting on? For all Evelyn knew, Sarah could be just another person who had come to work for Asher but had her own secrets. But it wasn't the time to focus on Sarah. Not yet. With a deep breath, Evelyn continued to the library. She had a job to do. As she sifted through the digital files left on Asher's desk, notes from their last meeting about Aurora, Evelyn began making a plan. The best way to get answers about Aurora's motives was to start where it all began, the family estate. Evelyn had done some digging on her own over the past few days, but now it was time to find out more about Aurora's past, her debts, and the secrets she was trying so hard to hide. The next evening, Evelyn found herself sitting at a small cafe in town, the kind of place she used to visit with Daniel. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the memories still lingered, soft and sweet. The dim lights and low hum of conversation made her feel like she could escape for just a moment. She wasn't alone, though. Asher had arranged for his private investigator, a man named Lucas, to meet her. Lucas was older, with graying hair and a sharp, calculating gaze. His reputation was well known in the circles of those with money and secrets. He had access to records and information that were off-limits to the public eye. "I've pulled up some records for you, Evelyn," Lucas said, his voice low and steady. He slid a folder across the table toward her. "Everything you need is in here." Evelyn opened the folder with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. The documents inside were revealing, far more than she had expected. Among the files were bank statements, property records, and court filings. They detailed a troubling pattern of financial instability and legal disputes that spanned years. Aurora had been involved in multiple property disputes and lawsuits, including one where she was accused of manipulating her late mother's will to gain access to her assets. "What does this mean?" Evelyn whispered, flipping through the pages. Lucas leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "It means your stepdaughter has been living off other people's misfortunes. She has a habit of targeting vulnerable family members and exploiting them for everything they are worth. She's been involved in multiple cases like this, across different states. Her game is clear. She doesn't care who she hurts, as long as she gets what she wants." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known Aurora was ruthless, but this was something entirely different. Aurora had been preying on vulnerable family members for years, using her charm and deceit to secure her future, no matter the cost. And what about Asher? Evelyn asked quietly, her eyes still fixed on the documents. What's her connection to him? Why does she keep asking about him? Lucas hesitated for a moment, his eyes darkening. That's where things get complicated. I dug a little deeper into the Blackwood family history. Aurora's mother, Asher's ex-wife, passed away suddenly, a few years before your husband. From what I found, there's a possibility Aurora may have been involved in her mother's death. Not directly, but she might have been a part of the financial manipulations surrounding it. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. The room seemed to spin around her. You're saying Aurora could have been involved in her own mother's death? Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucas nodded. It's all circumstantial, of course, but there's a clear connection between Aurora's financial troubles and her mother's passing. From the looks of it, she's been using people's vulnerabilities, grief, family ties, old debts, to secure her future. The next day, Evelyn took the documents to Asher. She didn't tell him everything, not yet, but she made sure he understood the depth of what they were dealing with. Asher listened quietly, his eyes narrowing as he processed the information. I've known Aurora was dangerous, Asher said, his voice cold, but I didn't realize just how far she'd go. She's been manipulating me too, hasn't she? Evelyn nodded. She's been trying to exploit your past, trying to dig into your personal life and get close to you. It's not just the house she wants, Asher. It's your entire life, your wealth, your power. Asher leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple as if the weight of the truth was too much to bear. She's been planning this for years. Evelyn continued, her voice steady. She knows you've been isolated, and she's been trying to get close to you to make you vulnerable. But I won't let her take advantage of you, Asher. I'm going to make sure she doesn't win. Asher's gaze softened for a moment, and he looked at Evelyn with an expression that was both grateful and weary. I know you will, Evelyn, he said quietly, and I trust you. In that moment, Evelyn realized she had found a purpose here, not just to care for Asher, but to protect him from the very people who had tried to manipulate both of them. But she also knew that the battle wasn't over yet. Aurora was still out there, and she would stop at nothing to reclaim what she thought was hers. As Evelyn left Asher's office, she felt a sense of determination settle over her. She wouldn't just be the caregiver anymore. She was going to fight for what was right. And this time, she was ready to unmask the monster lurking in her family's shadows. The war for truth and justice had only just begun. The days that followed felt like a slow march toward an inevitable confrontation. Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn deeper into a labyrinth of lies, manipulations, and secrets that ran much deeper than she had anticipated. Each step she took toward uncovering the truth about Aurora made her realize that the woman she had once considered family had turned into something far more dangerous. Evelyn's mornings were spent taking care of Asher's needs, his physical therapy, his meals, and the quiet moments where they shared fragments of their pasts. Despite the tension surrounding them, Asher seemed to trust her more and more with each passing day. But there were nights, late at night, when he would sit by the window, staring out at the dark ocean, lost in thought. He was more than just a billionaire with a tragic past. He was someone who had been betrayed, broken, and isolated by the very people he had trusted. That evening, as Evelyn prepared dinner for Asher, she noticed something strange. The house was eerily silent. Normally, Sarah was bustling around the estate, tending to various tasks. But tonight, the assistant was nowhere to be found. A feeling of unease crept over Evelyn. Where had Sarah gone? And why did she feel so much like a shadow, lingering just out of view? She decided to check on Asher, making sure he was comfortable. As she entered his study, she found him exactly where she had expected him, staring out at the waves, his expression distant. "You okay?" Evelyn asked, her voice soft but steady. Asher turned to her slowly, his brow furrowed. "I've been thinking a lot, Evelyn. I don't trust anyone right now, not even Sarah." The mention of Sarah's name sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. "What do you mean?" Asher sighed, pushing his chair back and running a hand through his hair. "I've had suspicions for a while now. Sarah's been here longer than anyone else. She knows too much about my routines. She's been taking notes on everything I do. I think she's been spying on me, working with Aurora." Evelyn's heart sank. She had suspected Sarah might not be entirely trustworthy, but hearing Asher confirm her fears made her stomach twist with dread. "I'm not sure how deep it goes," Asher continued, his voice low, "but I have a feeling Sarah is more involved in this than she's letting on. I don't know if she's working directly with Aurora or if she has her own agenda, but I've seen her talking to people when she thinks no one's around. She's hiding something." Evelyn stood still, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Asher had trusted Sarah for so long, and now that trust was shattering before her eyes. If Sarah was in league with Aurora, it meant they had been targeted from the inside. "I'll keep my eyes open," Evelyn said, though a knot had formed in her throat. "But we need to be careful, Asher. If Sarah and Aurora are working together, we could be walking into a trap." Asher's face darkened. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I think Sarah's ready to make her move." The following days felt like a game of cat and mouse. Evelyn watched carefully as Sarah continued to maintain her usual routine, but something in her demeanor had changed. The assistant seemed more guarded, more secretive, as if she knew Evelyn was onto her. Every time their eyes met, Evelyn could sense the tension in the air. One afternoon after lunch, Evelyn decided to take matters into her own hands. She needed to know more about Sarah's involvement. She couldn't let this charade continue. She had to expose the truth before it was too late. She waited until evening when the mansion was quieter. Asher had retired to his office to make some calls, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts and her suspicions. Evelyn made her way to Sarah's quarters, careful not to make any noise. The assistant's room was tucked away in a corner of the house, near the back entrance. It was time to search for answers. She pushed the door open, the faint creak of the hinges barely audible. The room was sparsely decorated, but Evelyn wasn't looking for decor. She was looking for anything that might hint at Sarah's true intentions. The first thing she found was a small notebook tucked under the mattress. Evelyn's pulse quickened as she flipped it open. The pages were filled with detailed notes about Asher's daily routine, his phone calls, his interactions with Evelyn. It was a record of his life, meticulously documented by someone who had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Her breath caught as she turned to the final page. There, scrawled in bold, hurried handwriting, was a plan. A plan that outlined how to undermine Asher's trust in Evelyn, how to manipulate the situation to make him believe that Evelyn was using him for his wealth. "Get closer to Asher, make him dependent, make him trust me." The words sent a wave of nausea through Evelyn. Sarah had been playing them both, pretending to be loyal while planning to betray them. But it wasn't just about Sarah. The last line of the notebook sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. "When the time is right, we make our move. Evelyn is the key. She has to be removed." Evelyn slammed the notebook shut, her hands trembling. She had been right. Sarah wasn't just working for Asher, she was part of the conspiracy to take everything from him. And now she was using Evelyn as the pawn in her twisted game. The next day, Evelyn confronted Asher. She didn't mince words. "Sarah's been working with Aurora. She's been documenting everything, planning how to take you down." Asher's face turned pale, the anger in his eyes simmering just beneath the surface. "I knew it. I knew she couldn't be trusted." Evelyn reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook, handing it to him. "She's been keeping tabs on you. She wants to destroy me to make you believe I'm the one taking advantage of you." Asher scanned the notebook, his hands clenching into fists. "This is worse than I thought. I never should have trusted her. I thought she was here to help." Evelyn could see the hurt in his eyes. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. But there was no time for regrets. Aurora was still out there, still plotting her next move. "We have to act fast," Evelyn said, her voice firm. "We need to expose Sarah before she has a chance to make her move. If we don't, it could be too late." Asher nodded, his jaw set with determination. "You're right. Let's put an end to this." Together, they began to make a plan to confront Sarah, to take back control of their lives. But Evelyn knew one thing for sure: their battle wasn't over yet. They had only just begun to uncover the web of lies that had ensnared them, and they would need every ounce of strength to fight back. The final confrontation was coming, and Evelyn was ready. But first, they had to expose Sarah for who she truly was, and prove that no one, not even a trusted ally, could stand in their way. The storm was coming.